I'm going to ask you to clear your desk of everything but your Chromebook. All you need this period is your Chromebook. So you can go ahead and clear your desk of everything else. So you've got a nice work surface. Yep, all you're going to need this period is your Chromebook. So I'd like you to clear your desk of everything but that Chromebook. Bless you. Bless you. And what we're going to do, we are going to start Lab 7. So in your Google Classroom, we should see it under the Classwork tab. Lab 7 for accelerated motion. You'll see that in the lab, there is a Google Sheet attached to the assignment. Go ahead, open up that Google Sheet. I'm just making a copy so that way I don't edit my file that I pushed out to you. Okay, so we have this Google Sheet opened in front of us. I'm going to just show you what you're doing, and then I'm going to ask you to pair up with somebody, and I'll show you how you can make your life a little bit easier. Just make sure your personal electronic devices are away, phones, earbuds, that kind of stuff. We don't need those in class. Okay, so this lab, as you can see, uses the same simulation that we used in the last lab, the Moving Man FET lab. So you can go ahead and open up that website once you've got your Google Sheet opened. And you're going to want to be able to see the position, the velocity, and the acceleration on your screen. So if you can't see those 3 variables listed, do you know how to shrink it on your screen so you can? On the top right of your screen, you've got your 3 dots that you can click on. And you can adjust the size to just shrink it down so you can see all 3 variables. Okay, I'm not going to go through the setup with you in this lab because you've already used this lab before. You know how to get the man back to his starting position. You know how to input velocity, position, and acceleration values. So what you're doing in this lab, once you've got that open, we're going to go ahead to part 1 in the lab. And what you'll see, there's only 3 parts. You've got part 1, part 2 where you're making graphs, and then you've got a conclusions tab. Let me go through each part and then I'll explain to you what I want you to do. So in part 1, this is where you're going to collect all your data and input it into the tables on this page. Remember that the data you type in is just numbers. You don't add units to any of the numbers in these tables. Why? They're already there in your column headings. See, it says position in meters and velocity in meters per second. So you're not going to type in meters and meters per second. And in this first simulation, you're going to set the man to 0 position, give him a velocity of 0 meters per second, and give him an acceleration of 0.5 meters per second squared. So if I were to come into the simulation, I'm at 0 meters per second. I need to change that to positive 0.5 meters per second squared. And then in the Google Sheet, it tells me I need 5 seconds of data. The last lab, we needed 20 seconds. This time we only need 5 seconds. So it's much quicker. Just hit play. Look at the time until you see them going for 5 seconds. Once you get to 5 seconds, you're going to hit pause. There we are. And then you're going to play it back. And what you can do is then at each time point, you see I've got a time here, 0 seconds. I go back into the Google Sheet and I'll record the position and the velocity values. And we'll do that for every half a second up until 5 seconds. Then you're going to reset it and do the man moving to the left and speeding up. And do the same thing. Just follow the directions on the page. Okay, there are 4 tables to complete on this page. You're going to complete all 4. All right, now let's go to part 2. Once you get through all 4 tables, look at what you're going to do in part 2. And this is really important. I need everybody's eyes and ears up front, not on this computer screen in front of you. In part 2, notice right at the top of the page, do not edit the data in the tables on this page. There are formulas behind each of the tables that's going to pull your data from the first tab, part 1, and import it directly into this part. So that way you're not retyping anything. Once you get to part 2, when you get to this part, table 1 with all your position data for each motion versus time, and table 2 with all of your velocity data for each motion versus time will be filled in. And your job is to make 2 graphs on this page. So look at what the first one is going to be. Once you get through, you go to step 1, it says from the position time data in that table, we want you to make a best fit scatter graph for each motion. And the graph must have all 4 motions on that same graph. We've done that before where we put multiple sets of data on the same graph. You're going to do the same thing here. You need to make sure you put a title on the graph. You need to make sure your X and Y axes are labeled with appropriate variable names and units. You need to make sure they are appropriately scaled, meaning you can see a clear 0, 0 on your graph. You need to make sure you're putting appropriate trend lines or curves on your graph. You need to make sure you put the equation for each trend line or curve on the graph. And then you need a legend on there so we can tell which line or curve corresponds to which motion. And that graph is going to go here in that yellow space. Then you're going to do the same thing for the velocity and time data. Again, following the directions in step 2. Make sure you hit all the bullet items that are there. Once you have those graphs made, you go to the conclusions and notice there are 4 conclusion fill-in-the-blank statements. The fill-in-the-blank statements you should be able to answer by looking at the graphs that were just made on the previous tab, part 2, and also by looking at the notes that you've got so far for Unit 3, with all of the graphs and descriptions of motion and the patterns that we're observing. This lab is not due today. But I want you to at least get through part 2 of the lab today. You should be able to get through part 2. Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I see some of you already working. I don't know why, because I haven't turned you loose to do this yet. You may have done something that you don't need to do. You're going to partner up with somebody in the class. We have 18 students in the class. That means we're going to have 9 groups of 2. In each group, you are going to split up who's doing which table in part 1. You're going to each do 2 tables, 2 different tables. So that way all 4 tables are done. What you will do once you have your 2 tables and your partner has their 2 tables is you will then talk to each other to get the other person's data and type it in. Do you understand what I'm saying? And by that point, you now have all 4 tables done. And then you can work together on making the graphs in part 2. Especially if you're not sure how to get something labeled correctly or things aren't showing up, you're going to make sure you get these graphs done today. So that way, if you have a problem with the graph and your partner doesn't know how to help you with it, or you're both struggling to get it correct, you then raise your hand and ask me to come over to help you. So that way I can give you the quick fix to get it fixed. And that way you can move on to the next step without losing any points. And once you finish this, if you get through part 2, Then you work together on doing the conclusions. Once you have finished the conclusions, make sure that you have clicked enter after that last step in number 4 and moved into the end. That way your Google Sheet will save your answer to every question. Without doing that, it doesn't save your answers. Some of you have gotten comments back from me that this is blank, and you were like, I typed it in. It didn't save it. That's because you didn't move out of the cell when you were done. It doesn't save it until you move out of the cell. And then if you happen to finish it today, you can turn it in. But I'm telling you now, this is not homework, and you will have another class period to work on this, or part of another class period to work on finishing it. So don't work on it at home. You're supposed to work on it now in class. This will not be homework. All right, any questions? If you happen to finish early, then you can work on finishing those 3 pages in your packet, 18, 19, and 22. And if that's done, then you can work on the review pages at the end of the packet, 29 through 42. Okay, questions for me? Would you like me to allow you to pick who you want to work with, or do I need to assign partners? I'm sorry? Okay, if you don't have a partner, then let me know and I will partner you up. But your groups of 2, there will be 9 groups of 2 because we have an even number of students here today. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So no groups of 3. No groups of 3. Follow? All right, go ahead and get to work. Again, if you don't have a partner, let me know and I will partner you up. And just